Warning, critical damage. Warning, critical damage.
Status.
Thrusters offline. Safety protocols offline. Systems reboot in 15 seconds. Planetary impact in 6, 5.
This is gonna hurt a
4,
little.
3.
This is a 2007 Iron Man advertorial video created by then-future Deadpool director Tim Miller. It was one of 3 promotional shorts designed to introduce the character of Tony Stark and Iron Man to a generation of kids and mainstream moviegoers, many of whom at the time really didn't know who Iron Man was.
Because most people never heard of Iron Man, most of the population.
I guess it helped, because a year later, Jon Favreau's linchpin blockbuster would go on to gross over $500 million at the box office, launching the most successful film franchise of all time.
Push it!
But while Iron Man's international appeal would rejuvenate the comic book movie industry, and Robert Downey Jr. in the MCU would solidify the character as one of Marvel's most likable comic book heroes, Iron Man didn't exactly start out that way. Back in 2008, under the impending shadow of Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, Marvel was staking their future as an independent movie studio on a character who is literally designed to be oppositional.
Let's face it, this is not the worst thing you've caught me doing.
On creating Iron Man, Stan Lee once said, "I think I gave myself a dare. It was the height of the Cold War. If there was one thing the young readers hated, it was war. It was the military. I got a hero who represented that to the 100th degree, a weapons manufacturer, an industrialist. I thought it would be fun to take the kind of character nobody would like, and make them like him." But it's exactly what makes Tony Stark so unlike conventional superheroes that ended up paving the way for one of the most compelling and successful narrative through lines in mainstream cinema, because more than any other character in the MCU, Tony Stark's characterization and his true character are the most at odds with each other.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
In his seminal book, Story, Robert McKee writes, "Characterization is the sum of all observable qualities of a human being, all aspects of humanity we could know by taking notes on someone day in and day out."
Now this, on the other hand, is Agent Romanoff's assessment of you.
Now, if you've watched through the MCU, then you know how Tony Stark is characterized.
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
And what do you say to your other nickname, the Merchant of Death?
Yeah, apparently I'm volatile, self-obsessed, don't play well with others. Textbook narcissism. Agreed?
It's quite the laundry list of flaws to sell to a mass audience, but director Jon Favreau and his team on the first Iron Man movie did something clever. I mean, aside from the obvious. They pitted their fundamentally flawed protagonist against a similarly characterized antagonist. Tony Stark and Obadiah Stane share a profession, wealth, power, hubris, a dictator's need for control. I mean, Stan Lee's cursory description of Iron Man could have just as easily been used to describe Ironmonger. But at some point, things change. Their arcs diverge, revealing a separation between what a character seems to be on the surface and who they truly are. And it's here that we begin to lean into McKee's next point, which is that characterization is not the same as true character. True character, McKee says, is revealed in the choices a human being makes under pressure, and the revelation of true character, in contrast or contradiction to characterization, is fundamental to all fine storytelling.
We're not doing a good enough job. We can do better. We're going to do something else.
Like what?
This relationship is in some ways the inverse of what we see in, say, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2.
Intelligence is not a privilege, it's a gift, and you use it for the good of mankind.
There we had 2 characteristically good men of similar sensibilities and passions, where one is driven to use a common power for evil. And here we have 2 characteristically bad men, where one is driven to use a common power for good. Now, granted, the true nature of Sam Raimi's Dr. Octavius is substantially more complex than Ironmonger's, and a topic I've covered before, but this is all just to say, a protagonist should surprise us. The greater the dichotomy between true character and perceived characterization, the more captivating our hero becomes. See, the real trouble for the screenwriter doesn't come in crafting this contradiction. It comes in maintaining it over the course of multiple films.
Don't push it, I'll give you a war you won't believe.
McKee notably cites Rambo as an example of how a failure to maintain this dichotomy can have a detrimental effect on franchise sequels. In First Blood, Sylvester Stallone's Rambo begins a burned-out war veteran traveling on foot in search of peace and solitude. But when he's unceremoniously provoked by a local sheriff, a ruthless killer is uncaged. It's a gripping contradiction, but by the time the sequels rolled around, all that revelation was already spent. Rambo's characterization and his true character became one and the same. Producer Kevin Feige and the filmmakers throughout the MCU managed to avoid this trap by not resolving the discrepancy between Iron Man's character and characterization too early. In the final scene of the first Iron Man movie, Tony Stark is instructed by Agent Coulson to share with the press a story that would effectively cover up his involvement in the events of the film and maintain his secret identity. After all, that's why superheroes wear the mask. But for Stark, to do that would be to resolve his hubris, to undermine his need to control the narrative, and to align the true character, partially unveiled to us in this film, with a conventional characterization of a superhero, which is why, in a twist ending and a famously improvised line by Robert Downey Jr., Stark openly admits to the world,
I am Iron Man.
in one line, we're reminded that this character is still interesting. In one line, seeds of future conflict are planted for a decade of films to follow. How will this character struggle to reconcile who he is with what he is? That is, after all, the question that drives the whole thing. The reason we as an audience have even been able to trace Iron Man's arc through the MCU is because the conflicts in each film were built up and up from the incongruity between Tony Stark's true character as a superhero and his characterization as an abundantly flawed protagonist. As long as Stark had flaws, as long as he had ego and arrogance and hubris, he had conflict. Conflict for his true nature and for the franchise to overcome. Quite poetically, Iron Man self-perpetuated his own arc, gradually working through that laundry list of defects along the way, until finally, his characterization and true character aligned, and his story could end. Hey everybody, I'm Danny Boyd. What's your favorite Iron Man moment or quote from the MCU? Leave a comment. And if you want to support me and what I do, you can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/CinemaStix. Until next time.